Many of us were united Wednesday afternoon and evening, staring at our television and computer screens or at our phones, watching the events in our nation's capital, looking for more information. We watched protesters breaching the gates and watched our elected leaders hurried out to safety. Listening to commentators throughout the evening, I heard words that unfortunately resonate with us, with the Jewish people. Among them, desecration and entry into the most sacred of places. Words that surely speak to the story of Hanukkah that we turned to just 1 month ago. Indeed, we, the Jewish people, whatever our political leanings, are well versed in a story in which our sacred sanctuary is breached by an enemy. A story in which we need to fight for our convictions against a mighty foe, win back our space, clean it, and rededicate it. Sound familiar? That story is told in the books of Maccabees, interestingly, not books of our scripture, but a story that is ours. And that story echoes throughout our history with so many parts of our Jewish story throughout the ages. The image of foes transgressing the inner sanctum of our democracy no doubt resonates with fear from places in our Jewish journey where Jews thought they were safe amidst the government of their country, but then that safety was upended and they had to flee. Certainly those among us whose dear ones fled Germany and other European countries have histories that echo this type of events. Or it simply touches something in our souls here in the Goldena Medina, the golden land that our forebears came to for freedom, security, and opportunity. Thank God and thanks to human action, the foes were removed and Congress returned to the chamber that evening, in essence rededicating it with the work of democracy that they were there to do. Powerful words were spoken from both sides of the aisle, affirming the elevated mission of our elected officials. Our ancestors, of course, in the Hanukkah story, rededicated their sanctuary with light, with ritual, and psalms of praise to God, with their elevated actions. Both spaces are sacred in their own way and are there to lift us up, to inspire us, to challenge us to aim higher, to do good. My colleague, Rabbi Brian Stoller, some of you may know, had been in Chicago in his previous position. Rabbi Stoller, who worked in the Capitol before entering the rabbinate, wrote about the Capitol in these terms, and I quote, that the halls of the Capitol, the Senate chamber, are filled with the weight of the place in the air, the respect, a reverence. The people who work in the House and Senate know they're working in a sacred place. They know the work they're doing is sacred work. That doesn't mean the Capitol is always a friendly and peaceful place. It's not. There are debates and disagreements, sometimes vicious ones. Tempers flare, unkind things are said. But at the core of it, everyone who goes to work on Capitol Hill knows that they are entrusted with a higher calling to serve the American people. Jewish people enter a new book of Torah, Exodus. Exodus is at its core a book of protest, a book of redemption, a book of freedom, and a book of sacred space. 25 chapters into Exodus, our ancestors are told, "V'asuli mikdash b'tochanti b'tocham." Let them build me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. They are told to serve God by bringing the offerings of their hearts, literally as their hearts move them, to create a home for God, as our ancestors understand it, a sanctuary. What's interesting is they are to create a sacred space for God to dwell among them. Not just a sole physical space for God to live as the ancients saw it, but for God to dwell among and amidst the people as they were to do their sacred work. The sanctuary is, that portable sanctuary or Mishkan in the wilderness, is of course the precursor to the temple in Jerusalem that the Maccabees rededicated generations later. So we know, Jews, we know about sanctuary, we know about sacred space. We know that it's more than a room, but what goes on in the room, even who is in the room or tent. We know about sacred space. Our synagogues are sacred, so too our homes. The Jewish home is called a mikdash ma'at, a small sanctuary, where we replicate the work of the temple in Jerusalem when we offer bread and blessings. Our table, too, is sacred in that regard. And we Jews know about protest from Torah onward. Shmot, our opening portion of Torah, starts out with protest. A new Pharaoh arises who does not know Joseph, that is, he's not familiar with our people. So what does he do? He enslaves them, he oppresses them. And what do our ancestors do? They revolt. How do they revolt? They have more kids. They increase their numbers. And then when Pharaoh says to the midwives, kill all the baby boys, what do? Shifra and Pua, who are named, and the other midwives, no doubt, let the babies live. Come, we all know the story of baby Moses in the basket. That in and of itself is an act of protest and defiance. The biblical mothers and midwives respond by saving life and affirming life. This is their protest. People certainly know about freedom. In this book of Torah, our ancestors are redeemed in the most dramatic of acts on the shores of the Red Sea. Soon after, they gather at Sinai, and God speaks to them through Moses. I am Adonai, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. That first commandment is really a statement of relationship and expectation. God says, I freed you. I saved your life. And implicit in that is, now you have work to do. You've got to uphold your end of the covenant. So what is that covenant? What are the commandments? We know them. Here are some. We know those 10, right? That include honoring your parents, observing the Sabbath, not stealing, not murdering. And we know many others too. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, justice, justice you shall pursue. Run after justice and fairness. Move our world toward equality. We know that we are to take care of the needy in our midst. We are to recognize that each of us is created in God's image. And we are told to offer peace. Even in a moment of battle that seems to call for fighting, stop and offer peace to your enemy. Of a most tumultuous, unsettling week. Like the Maccabees, can commit ourselves to rededication. How? 3 things. Let us first create sacred space at our tables this Shabbat. Whether you usually light candles and do the blessings or not, stop and do it. Light candles. Say the blessings and reflect on your personal Jewish history and our people's history. Why do we celebrate Shabbat? We're told 2 different reasons in Torah. One is to remember the Exodus from Egypt, and one is to remember the works of creation. So look out at our beautiful world and look at your own history of freedom, our own history of freedom, and light the candles as an act of affirmation and protest. And as you do, consider the gratitude you have for your freedoms, for our world, for life, and think about who you could express gratitude to. Perhaps it's someone in your home, perhaps it's someone who serves you in Washington, D.C. Where does your gratitude lie? Stop and express it. Number 2. As you reflect on what you're grateful for, reflect on the democracy of these United States and commit yourself to act. Protest for the sake of life. Give time and voice to your causes. Share resources as you're able. Do not sit idly by, as Torah tells us, but speak and act to protect your freedoms, our freedoms. Remember, protest is part of our tradition. So let us protest with the goals of life and the sanctity of life. Seek peace and justice. We can do this. We can seek peace and justice in the small spaces of our homes and families, and we can even do so in the large spaces of our nation. Let us actively live our values and fulfill the mitzvot of our covenant, truly elevating the words and deeds. speak, that we act toward these aims. That can seem overwhelming. How can I seek peace and justice in this larger world? We can. Remember, in the words of our tradition, we are told, seek peace and pursue it. That means seek it at home, pursue it, run after it in the world, do something to make peace. And we are told, in a place where no one acts like a human or like a mensch or like a good person, strive to be human. Don't get pulled down, but elevate yourself. And remember, too, that it is not up to us to complete the work, but neither are we free to desist from it. We have to start. Let us work together to do this work. Let us work together to achieve and keep peace and to bring people together as kind, compassionate humans. For life and the sanctity of life, let us protest with these goals in mind. Shabbat Shalom.